Hey everyone, I'm the Real Ebab, and today we're going to be recapping the patch notes for Downfall. There have been a significant number of changes made to Guardian, as well and some minor changes made to other characters. Um, but honestly, even if there was just a small patch, I'd still be covering this. Uh, let's go to the compendium here, take a look at the card library. First thing that you might notice if we scroll down a bit, we have some new art. And I'm going to get to this in a bit, or I'll show you it as we go along and leave it on screen for a bit to appreciate it. Of course, if you want to see it too, you can always take a look at the compendium in your own game. But yeah, as I said, a lot of balance changes. I'm going to go through them one by one and just talk about my thoughts about how this is going to affect the series going forward. The first thing, before we even get into any specific cards, is that tracking win rates across this patch doesn't make sense. Like, I could keep adding the statistics to to what I have already, and they'll still go in the spreadsheet, but having them all lumped together is not I don't think it's not very good for accurate statistics. Obviously, in the past, some of these card changes, some of these cards that are getting changes, will have been a lot weaker or a lot stronger, depending on the card, of course. So we want the stats to accurately reflect that. So since we've hit episode 40, everything on the spreadsheet we can basically say is complete. We have a complete 40 run win rate for every card and every relic that we've encountered so far. And then we're going to separate the next 60 runs so that they have their own win rates. I think the relics... I'm still going to separate the relics, just in case things change drastically. But if they don't, you can still average out everything yourself manually. I might even put a column in the spreadsheet to do so. But the cards are 100% staying separate between patches. Alright, that was enough rambling. I don't think I explained that very well, but I think I eventually got the point across. So, starting with the commons, none of these have changed. Charge Up. This art, I think, was already here. It is no longer uncommon. It has moved to common. It is now gain 6 block, next turn gain 2 temporary strength, making this Guardian's 4th common block card. Before there were only 3, now there are 4. The upgrade makes it 8 and 3. I'm honestly not sure how this is going to affect things. I don't see myself taking this, just preliminarily. 6 block is not very much, barely better than a defend, and 2 temporary strength doesn't feel good enough to warrant taking it, I think. And that's next turn, so you kind of have to rely on next turn being a good turn for offense, which I guess maybe is not terribly difficult. If you're playing this card, it's a block card, right? So you're already trying to block on that turn, in theory. So you use that as a block turn, and the next turn you set up a slightly larger damage turn with the 2 temporary strength. I'm thinking like you're facing the second big hit from Lagavulin, you're blocking with this card. Next turn you gain the 2 temporary strength, you have Vent Steam and a multi-attack. And that's a good situation because you blocked for more the turn before whenever the big hit was coming, and the turn that it's not attacking, suddenly you're doing amazing with your damage. Unfortunately, this also has the opposite problem, where if you draw this on the wrong turn, where they're not attacking, and then you need to block next turn, then this card doesn't do very much. I think this inconsistency is going to be difficult to handle. The one thing I could see really redeeming this Well, actually, a couple things, a couple situations. A couple situations being stasis, in which cards you attack cards are coming out next turn for sure, and in decks with a lot of offense but not much defense, so that you can almost guarantee that you get a good hand of attacks the next turn, and this will perform a useful function in keeping you from losing too much HP while you rush everything down. So I think overall, the previous card was weaker, I think wonkier, definitely weirder. A 0-cost card that went into stasis and only gave you a benefit next turn in block and strength was hard to take. And the upgrade being 1 was also awkward. It was fine if you had ways to put it into stasis, but if you had to play it to put it into stasis, it was not good. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not sure of the exact reasons why this was changed in this way. But I guess we'll see how it plays out. And seeing this card changed at all, I think, is a positive. For the simple fact that a card that you don't take very often, and being weird, for the fact that taking a card that you don't, seeing a card that you don't take very often, because it's weak and weird, feels bad. So getting a change of pretty much any kind to make it somewhat generically valuable, I think it is a step up. I'm not sure if it's a step in the right direction, but it's a step up, and I think that's positive. Up next, Crystal Ray, gain an additional 2 damage on both the normal and the upgrade. This is not enough to make me want to take this. I was expecting something like, I would want to say 6 damage to make it 16-20, or something along those lines. Make it closer to Perfected Strike in value, after you socketed the gem, of course. Of course, Perfected Strike has the advantage, or the disadvantage, that in the late game it's usually pretty bad. Meanwhile, Crystal Ray gets better as the game goes on. So you could use that to justify the lower starting numbers, which I think 16 is still reasonable for. You have to wait to socket the gem that you get at the beginning of the game before this gets to 18, which is Perfected Strike's base value. 6 damage plus 6 strikes, times 2 damage. And then from there you can keep making it stronger. The problem is, with this much damage, it's slightly better, which I guess means in slightly more situations I'll take it, but it's a common card. It is a common card that requires you to have a lot of scaling coming up in the game, and until then it kind of just sucks. So you have to take other cards to compensate. And taking a curse, something that could essentially be considered a curse, in your deck, and waiting until it gets good for later, can sometimes be a viable option. But in the case of gems, you don't know for a fact that gems are going to be part of your big strategy. Also, in the past when I've used this, in order for this to be actually good, you need a lot of gems, and you need vulnerable. You need both things, which I guess the vulnerable is not too difficult to come by. You have a common card that gives vulnerable, and I guess a garnet. I'd put that around the mid-range of possibility. I think it would be a lot. I think if you have 2 common vulnerable cards, if you have 2 vulnerable cards in the common pool, I would say that's almost guaranteed to show up in your run. But just one is about a 50-50, and uncommons and rares just get even less frequent to even be negligible. So yeah, you're already relying on a 50-50 even with just the vulnerable part, not even the part that's in the card. So yeah, I don't think this is going to make much of a difference. Maybe it'll get another buff later, though. I don't think they're done with the card. It's just a temporary measure. Up next, Incinerate. Extra 2 damage. It now deals 9, which is great, I think. I think this is a lot more in line with the starting power level Incinerate should be as a common card. At the beginning of the game, you only have Curl Up to put a card into stasis. And so that already makes it like a 50-50 what you draw first. I guess a little bit higher because you could draw them in the same hand. But if you don't have a card in stasis, the Accelerate does nothing. So having a base 9 damage, I think, is fine to go with to combo with something of this power. Actually, it reminds me of Pommel Strike now that I think about it. Pommel Strike being 9 damage, draw a card. What's funny is the upgrade now accelerates twice and does 10 damage. So that's very similar to Pommel Strike being 10 damage, draw 2 whenever upgraded. This change was absolutely needed, though. The extra base damage is nice. Accelerating twice, definitely needed, just because one accelerate for one energy is not efficient enough to care about. Accelerating twice also has this really nice property that if you have a card in stasis, this will get it out 90% of the time. The only time being is if you have a card in stasis that's still that is a 2 cost or higher, and still has multiple turns to go, and still has at least 3 turns to go. Accelerate twice in the base deck, though, since every card costs 1, except for the gem, which costs 0. The maximum that a card can go into stasis is for 2 turns. So accelerating twice would get a card out immediately in most cases. And also, 1-cost cards are very common. So, yeah, very nice change. You can definitely expect me to take this more often in the future. Had an episode recently where I had to take these speculatively in the beginning of the run, which was a valuable learning experience. But unfortunately for my learning experience, it turned out to be for nothing. Maybe not for nothing. Maybe I'll be able to generalize that what I learned in some way. This didn't get changes, neither did this. Priming Shot, this got a bit of a change. This now braces for 4. Wow. I'm joking. Brace 4 is a lot better than Brace 3, though, that's for sure. And the fact that this is the only Brace 4 card in the common pool with a Piercing Hide and a Recover, this is fine, because now if you pick up a Priming Shot with 2 of these, or a Priming Shot with any 2 of these, you now have the ability to enter defensive mode on the first shuffle. Yeah. Because 4, 3, 3, and 10 from Curl Up will make 20. Also, the upgrade here is now Brace 6. Significant upgrade. It comes at the cost of 1 damage on the upgrade. It used to be 11. That being said, I think this is still fine. I'm not sure how Brace 6 will go, to be honest. Last time I tried Brace 6 on a card, it was underwhelming, but there have been other Brace changes, or other card changes with Brace on them. So, maybe this is fine. We'll get to one of those pretty quickly, actually. Alright, we just did Priming Shot. These are all the same. Sapphire is now a common, and braces for 4 instead of 3. In fact, it has been switched rarity with Aquamarine, which has moved to uncommon. This I definitely think was warranted, although I wonder how often I'm going to be taking Aquamarine now when I'm offered it. It's obviously very strong, but not being able to build into it might affect its play rate even more often than usual. I think it's still very useful for common attack cards such as Priming Shot, but we'll see. And by the way, this is the reason that I said Priming Shot Brace 6 might be a good idea now, because Sapphire in Priming Shot now braces for 10 in 1 card. Significant upgrade to what it would have been before, Sapphire Priming Shot being 6 together. Now this being 10 together is a huge step up. And a little bit more to talk about Sapphire. Since it's a common gem, That means it's now available for Gem Finder and at the beginning of the game with your starting relic. I'm not sure how I'm going to do this exactly with the start of the game. Brace 4 is not really something I want to put into Twin Slam still. It'll really depend. I think, though, there will be other good cards to put it in now. Brace 4 is better than Brace 3 by actually a long shot because of how the brace numbers work out. I can put those into... I can put it into cards like Priming Shot and Roll Attack, maybe even Piercing Hide. And it'll have a much higher chance of being able to send me to defensive mode. So I think the strategy for the early game is actually going to be keep this unsocketed, and then wait for those cards rather than put it into Twin Slam. Before I was thinking, before this update even came out, because I knew this change was coming, I was thinking that I would put this into Twin Slam and then upgrade Curl Up, and then that would be 12, 4, and 4 is 20. That would be able to send me into defensive on the first shuffle. That would have been my strategy. I would have upgraded Curl Up over Twin Slam. Going up the Spire, though, I think I came up with this plan while I was still going down the Spire in downfall mode, so I would have been able to socket it immediately. Wouldn't have worked. And there's another reason I'll show later as to why it wouldn't have worked anyway either. As for the Gem Finder, I keep clicking off this. I was gonna go look at something else, but I forgot about Gem Finder. Gem Finder, I was using that before in multiple ways, but the main way that I used it was to create dexterity and ward combos with Emerald and Aquamarine to create a defensive system. Now we can't do that. Took away one of the key components, now can't do that at all. However, replacing it with Sapphire makes for a new interesting strategy that maybe we just put Brace onto several cards. And I kind of like that as an alternate method of defense. One of the big things that Guardian needs in the late game is consistent Brace. At least, I would say most of the time. I think it's over 50%, but I'm not sure how far over. Because you can have other strategies for winning the game. But consistently staying in defensive mode is pretty darn good. So if we were to use Gem Finder and put Sapphire into a bunch of cards, we could more reliably and more in a more controlled manner enter and stay in defensive mode, which will already give us block. And keep us safe in most of the situations. It might actually require us to take more actual block cards, because being in defensive mode is nice, but with a maximum of 10 block per turn, it isn't going to keep you 100% safe from the late game stuff. But overall, I think we can still maybe use this, and Gem Finder will be a lot more situational now. And we'll have to think a lot harder and maybe experiment a little bit more with just how we use Sapphire. Overall, though, I think I'm going to keep putting those in Brace cards. And, oh yeah, this is coming out before the Gem... this is coming out before the Gem guide because of this and the Aquamarine change. It was super important to cover this first, just as a preamble, a precursor to that. Because if we're doing an outdated guide right after a patch comes out, there's no reason to do that. Up next, we have a new card, Strike for Strike. Deal 13 damage, enemy attacks you for 3 damage. You upgrade 17 damage, and the damage to you stays the same. A little bit weaker than Hemokinesis is my thought, but there are some key aspects here that can be maybe used. For example, enemy attacking you for 3 damage, the biggest thing is, of course, Thorns being a little bit better than usual. Thorns means that whenever the enemy attacks you with this card, they will be dealt Thorns damage. So this card essentially scales with Thorns. I'm not exactly sure how this works, actually. It could just be a single attack for 3, but it could depend on the multi-attack they're doing. I doubt that that's how that works. It'd be interesting if it did, but maybe a bit too punishing and unintuitive. Like, if you're in the birds fight, the last thing you would want to find out about this card is that it's dealing 18 damage to you just because you thought this was going to attack you for 3, just a single 3 instead. Even though technically the thorns damage would be better. Also, it has a socket, so you can just put thorns right in there. Or you can put an aquamarine, or I guess whatever. I haven't really figured out what other things you would want to put in here yet, but I'm sure there are possibilities available. Another thing about this, of course, there's it's lower damage than usual, than Hemokinesis on Ironclad. I guess part of that is because it's a common card. But another part of this is that 3 damage, attacking you for 3 damage is also essentially 3 brace, if you're willing to lose the HP for it. In a few of my episodes so far, I have sort of mentioned that idea. I don't think I've explained it, though. Sometimes self-damage is really good because it can act as a small brace number. For example, Jax is a self-damage card. You can use that to enter defensive mode when you're just only a little bit away. And this is a similar fashion. We could use this to enter defensive mode whenever we're only a couple brace away, just by sacrificing a bit of HP. So I expect to use this at least a couple times in the upcoming episodes. At least that little mechanic there, taking a little bit of intentional damage. So overall, I think this is an interesting card. If I had to guess, this would probably be B tier. I think it will be useful a decent amount of the time with a bit of situationality to it. But overall, I like seeing the 13 damage. Guardian really lacks high damage numbers, and something like this would help quite a bit. Especially because 3 damage, Guardian is such a defensive character that it probably won't matter that much. So, yeah, I would probably want to take that a lot. Also, just a little quick thing. Little tip for those of you out there. Don't be afraid to take cards with downsides. Find ways to work around the downsides and work and use the upsides to your advantage as much as possible. It'll open up worlds of new potential ways to become stronger in the game. Hermit, especially in this mod, has a lot of downside cards that people are afraid to take until they realize they probably shouldn't avoid them. Anyways, up next, Temporal Shield. Sorry, I got ahead of myself there. Temporal Shield. Gain 8 block, accelerate. I'm a fan of this change. I didn't really like the conditional attached to Temporal Shield before. I thought it was annoying rather than interactive. You can't take this card unless you have consistent stasis, or else it's just a block 8. But here, it now accelerates. Again, kind of adjacent to Shrug It Off being accelerate instead of just a raw draw. And it upgrades to 11, so very adjacent. I wonder if that was on purpose, the way they did the damage numbers on Accelerate and the numbers on Temporal Shield to mirror Pommel Strike and Shrug It Off on Ironclad. It's an interesting thought. But yeah, so real quick, you may already notice, we now have 2 cards with acceleration buffs. That's going to make Stasis a lot stronger, and we're not even done yet. Moving on, none of these got changes. Yeah. Ancient Power is the next change. That was the one I almost said. Gain 3 temporary strength and dexterity. A little bit of a nerf to the numbers, but 2 main changes. 1, it has a socket, and 2, it doesn't exhaust. Sorry, I zoned out for a second. So yeah, I think the numbers on Ancient Power, like looking at the way that it is now, thinking about Ancient Power before, it does make me think that the numbers were a little bit too high. I think 3 temporary strength and dexterity is going to be a little bit more balanced. And Old Ancient Power being 4 temporary strength and dexterity exhaust was kind of a hit or miss card. If you hit, you hit pretty big. If you missed, well, you probably just shuffled it back into the draw pile. And you couldn't reuse the temporary strength and dexterity for temp buff scaling. You only got 1 shot. But here, not only is it not exhausting, but you now have a socket. You can put an Onyx in it if you're lucky enough to find that. Or you can put, I guess, a Shiv or a Ward in there to immediately get some value out of it. I'm not sure what else I would put there. Maybe a Garnet would be nice. I wouldn't mind putting a Garnet in there with the temporary strength. It'd be like a reverse spend steam Ruby situation. Kind of interesting. I would also not mind putting a Quartz in there. Since this is a setup card, it would enjoy being able to draw a card to better make use of the setup. Whenever I get to the gem guide, I will definitely go over these in more detail. But for now, I think I like this change. The numbers down does make me a little bit wary of the consequences. Like, if I take this with a Walker Claw or some other multi-attack, I might be inclined to think I'm a bit stronger than I actually am because the damage numbers went down. So I'll keep an eye on that. But overall, I think this should be... this is a great change. Also, the upgrade is 4. Which I guess is exactly the same as it was before. The upgrade on Ancient Power before was you get to keep a permanent strength index. Which I guess was even more janky, considering the what I said already about it being hit or miss and the numbers being a little too big to compensate. Interesting. I think that this is like a much improved version of the card for balance and for design in general. I will enjoy getting to use this. Alright. As I mentioned before, Aquamarine is now uncommon, and counter to the Sapphire, it will no longer show up in Gem Finder or at the beginning of the game. I think that's fine. This card didn't need a nerf. It was too easy to just socket these into any card and be safe on whatever turn you wanted. So now you have much less of a chance to do that. It'll be competing with other uncommons, which could go either way, but I think overall makes it less of a snap pick. The only thing I really wish they had done was move the Shiv to common, but oh well. Let's see. Clone got a new art. Kind of got this 3D printing looking effect. That's pretty nice. Although I don't think it's meant to represent 3D printing as much as it is to be like sci-fi materialization thing. You know, where kind of like laser beams are coming out and building the thing. Interesting that. Oh yeah, this is just Guardian's Power Core. I was thinking it looked like Overload, but that's also just Guardian's Power Core. So that's interesting. The card is not functionally different. It's the same. Emergency also got new art. Guardian pressing an emergency button. Kind of like panic button. I can't help the thing scrolling. And Evasive Protocol we can take another look at. This art is just amazing. Dodging the knives, coming at them. Same effect again. Floating orbs. This is another interesting change. One that I like as well. It is nerfed. Whenever you, at least I think it's nerfed. Whenever you play a 0-cost card, deal 4 damage to a random enemy. Before Floating Orbs gave you Orb Slam, which is a 2 damage dealt twice card, like a Shiv, every turn. So it's like an infinite blades, but if you on a character that actually has strength and it scales double with strength. This was definitely too powerful in general. Also, it had some problems with with Time Eater and Heart, and I guess Watcher 3. I think that's the only other fight that cares about number of cards played. I guess Writhing Mass also had problems. I'm not sure about every single thing, but when this card had some weird problems with those fights, and just in general was too strong if you had like any strength. This change makes it a lot more stasis oriented. I really like this design and this idea for more benefits from playing zero cost cards. Although I'm wondering, I think it is a nerf, but I don't know if it's a significant nerf. Because with the stasis buffs, with the accelerate and the common cards, and the upcoming change that I'm going to show you, I think this might be just fine on its own. I definitely will still keep taking this. Although I think my pick rate for this will go up. Because before it was situational with strength, but now stasis is going to be a lot more common. So I might end up taking this just more generally. Especially because I just thought of this. One of the restrictions that floating orbs had before is the fact that you only got one per turn. But this can trigger as many times as you're able to make it happen in one turn. Also, synergizes with Fragmented Gem and Aquamarine, just by themselves. And I guess any other gem that's non-socketed, but these in particular will give you 8 more damage apiece. Up next, Future Planes does not have... Oh wait, I didn't even look at the upgrade here. 6. It's no longer innate. But that's a lot more damage. Yeah, definitely going to consider that in the future. It was innate before. No, it upgraded to 0 cost. What am I thinking? So this actually upgrades the damage. Okay. Interesting that they did that. I wonder why they had floating orbs be 0 cost in the first place. Like, and not give you an upgraded floating, and not give you upgraded orb slams, which are 3 times 2. Maybe it's a relic of old defensive mode, which I think had interactions with 0 cost cards. I don't know. Anyways, Future Planes doesn't look like it has any functional changes, but it has a couple. First of all, if you have multiple Future Planes in play, what used to happen is that you would put 2 cards into stasis. You would choose 2 cards. They would show up on the left here and the right here. But even though you chose this one first and this one second, this would go into the second stasis slot, and this one would go into the first. Visually, it would match, because like these cards would not cross over to go in, but functionally, if you pick a card first, you should go into the first stasis slot, and if the second card you pick should go into the second stasis slot. Now it acts like that. So the card you pick first will go into the first, the card you pick second will go into the second. So that was the behind-the-scenes change. And another behind-the-scenes change is the unfortunate fact that this no longer saves ethereal cards, which I wish they had not touched. Future Planes and ethereal both being a end-of-turn thing, it's just a matter of which goes first. I felt like it makes sense for Future Planes to go first, so that it had that interaction, but now it no longer saves ethereal cards. I wonder if they'll still be in your hand to choose from. I hope not, because I'm going to forget if that happens. I'll try not to, but I can't make any guarantees that I'll remember. If the ethereal cards are in their hand for anyone else, you bet a lot of people are going to forget that. So it makes me a little bit sad. I don't understand why the change was made, but something to keep in mind for the future. That's the biggest goal here. Figure out how this is going to affect the gameplay of Guardian in the future. Guardian World also got some new art. It's worth noting that the art is not all done by the same person, so the art style is going to differ from person to person. I'm just glad that we have art. This is also very nice, very nice whirlwind effect. I wonder if this actually looks like... No, I think this is tilted down more than Ironclad's whirlwind. Excuse me. Another new card, Metallicize. It has Harden's art, and the reason for that is because Harden was removed. This now replaces Harden. Actually, no. This replaces it took Harden's art, I guess Harden was removed to make room for Strike for Strike. Armored Protocol was removed to make room for Metallicize. And the reasoning they gave in the patch notes was that Armored Protocol was too inconsistent for the effect that it was trying to have, so it was easier to just give a Metallicize. And what's interesting about this is that this is exactly the reasoning I used to complain about the protocols in the first place. They're too inconsistent. They don't give you effects except when you're in defensive mode, which is kind of hard to control when you enter, which turn you enter in the first place. So if you're stacking effects on top of it, that gets even harder. Especially because if defensive mode only lasts one turn, so you can spend the majority of your turn entering defensive and then not being able to capitalize on those extra bonuses. Evasive Protocol is one of them. Actually, Evasive and Revenge Protocol are the only two that really require it. Armored Protocol just gave straight block, and Spiker Protocol just gave straight thorns, but Dexterity and Strength both require you to play more cards to make them useful. So having this, I don't know if I'll take it or not. I really don't. I really don't know. I'm not a fan of Metallicize on Ironclad, and they're a more aggressive character than Guardian. But we'll have to see. Maybe I can find a time for this to be useful. Either way, the fact that this has Hardened's Art, I actually really like. Because now I don't have to look at Hardened's Art and feel sad anymore. Let's see. This upgrades to 4, yeah. Anything else get changed here? No, that's still the same, unfortunately. Pre-programmed got new art. Very similar to Planning and Suspension right now, but those are already recolors, and they'll get replaced at some point. So, nice to have new art there. What else? Shield Spike's got new art. Snake Plant coming in. Oh yeah, Shield Spike's also got a change. The thorns are no longer temporary, which is great. Great change. How often am I going to actually get to use that? I have no idea. Maybe in another roll attack deck I will. Upgrades to 4 permanently, and the block is the same, and so is the brace. Overall, a change I like. I don't think it's going to affect things very often, but when it does, it'll be nice. Stasis Strike. This used to be rare, and it also used to be a 1 cost and deal 9 damage. It has now been changed to 2 cost and deal 15 damage, as well as being uncommon. This is interesting to me, because in the same vein, Time Capacitor was also nerfed 1 stasis slot, and still upgrades to 0 cost. Actually, no, that it used to be 2, upgrade to 3, but now it's always 1, and now upgrades the cost to 0. Very interesting changes. I think it was kind of warranted though, because having a bunch of stasis slots is really powerful. You're getting extra cards every other turn for free. This can end up just being a win con pretty much by itself. If you get the cards to fill up the stasis slots, you can win with a lot of decks. A lot of decks that just have raw value cards like deal damage, gain block. Now this is going to make things a little bit harder. I'm actually not sure how often I'll take this or Stasis Strike. I guess Stasis Strike being 15 damage is not terrible, and with a little bit of stasis support is fine. It also still doesn't exhaust, so you can gain as many stasis slots as you want with it, as long as you're willing to pay the cost. And this being 1 stasis slot as well. But with the upgrades to Accelerate, it's going to be maybe a little bit harder to justify taking these than usual. Maybe if we don't want to take... maybe if we want the option not to take the Accelerate commons in a deck that we don't already have them, these would be great. I think I would rather take these than common cards. But overall, we'll have to see. It is nice to have this happen more often, though. I think the extra stasis slot was a little bit underrepresented in the Guardian gameplay, so I think this makes things interesting. And I didn't really say it out loud, but they upgrade to 20. It's like a streamline upgrade, and this upgrades to 0 cost. Time Bomb. Now an attack. 2 energy, 14 damage to all enemies. Accelerate all cards in stasis. This is the other card that I was talking about. Also it exhausts. The other Accelerate. Accelerate all cards in stasis is a huge deal. I think this card is amazing for multiple reasons, this being one of them, but also just a 2-cost 14 damage to all enemies is very strong as well. In most characters' cases, you only have 1-cost area of effect cards in common, and I think even in uncommon. I think Defect has a 2-cost, but it only does 10 damage until you upgrade it. So it's a little bit underwhelming for its cost anyway. But this, in my experience with even modded characters, 2-cost AoE that does somewhere around this range of damage is very strong. This can do most of Gremlin's HP in one hit. This can one-shot almost every slime in the Slime Gang fight in Act 1. This will do significant damage to slavers. And of course the Gremlins show up twice, both in Gremlin Leader and in Act 1. So yeah, I think this will be a very big deal, and especially with the effect of Stasis. Spending 2 energy on this card may not even be a big deal at all. You get cards for free from Stasis to supplement whatever else you want to do that turn. If you have block in Stasis, suddenly you're not being punished for spending 2 energy on attacks. You're a lot safer after that. Or you can use attacks to finish the job. Exhaust, I think, is appropriate for this card, and its power level. I expect that this will be very strong. There's something in the back of my head saying that this might not be an end-all. This might not be overpowered, but I think that I will probably still take this a lot. Especially on Guardian, who already has trouble doing area of effect damage. Really, the only viable option before was Multi-Beam. Time Bomb and Guardian Whirl were both very difficult to use. Am I missing one? I think those are the only 3. I think I mentioned a while ago, not in this episode, but in previous episodes, that Thorns sometimes count. Oh yeah, Giga Beam, that's the other one. Giga Beam's the best one. But yeah, Stasis, not Stasis Strike. Time Bomb, I think, is going to be very good. We only have a couple more changes left. Oh yeah, Time Capacitor, new art. Stasis Strike and Time Capacitor. You can see a dude being encapsulated within a stasis slot. Very nice. And of course, Time Capacitor being a super ancient runed hourglass is very cool. Body Slam is now a rare. You gain 5 block and then deal damage equal to your block. Upgrades to 8. Body Slam was definitely in need of a nerf. This is so big of a change that I don't even know how to evaluate it right now. Obviously, if you need some kind of damage system, this might just be your guy. If you're building enough block, suddenly this shows up in your rare reward at the boss. You'll be glad to take it. The fact that it's not uncommon means it'll be hard to stack multiple of them. It also doesn't even upgrade. Like I said, it upgrades to gain 8 block. It doesn't even discount anymore. So it's harder to play. Stasis is harder to use on it. But overall, I think it'll still be strong. It's just going to be a lot more situational. I don't think I have to think about this too much right now because it's a rare card. Obviously, when it shows up, it'll show up at very predetermined times. Most of the time. Sometimes you get a random rare from card rewards. But this showing up in the boss rewards will pretty much allow me to compare it to other strong cards and make a pretty informed decision, even if I don't know how this fits right now in general. Let's see. Oh yeah, big art here. Look at all these. Compile package. Amazing. Got a screen with sort of the vector art. The old vector art where it was just a bunch of lines. At least I think it's called vector art. And if I hover over it here, you can even see the packages. We'll go to the colors section later to take a look at them. Construction form also getting art. Kind of like this eldritch thing. You got the scales going in these patterns here. It makes it look like a wreath on the outside, and you can kind of see in the background the fainter, darker. I don't want to say tubes. I want to make it sound like serpentine. It's kind of like a serpentine body of extra scales in the background. It just keeps going. I actually have this as my wallpaper. It's so good. This got revealed a long time ago because art updates do not happen very often. In this, a lot of art has been waiting to be added for this update specifically. I think a lot of other characters got more art than Guardian did, but I'm happy to have what we have here. Exploit gems, also hooking up a wire through 3 gems here. This is kind of like what I would put in exploit gems. Ruby, amber, draw. Good choices there. Gem finder being a sack of gems. I wish I could grab all these gems. I still think that restricting this to common gems is a little bit weird and kind of disappointing. I think you could get away with choosing to add a random gem to your deck and having it only make a choice of 1 or skip rather than a choice of 3. But oh well. Giga Beam, amazing. You can't even see how Giga the beam is. The card cuts it off before you see the whole thing. It just looks amazing. Spheric Shield, there's the other change. Oh wait, there's a couple more, actually. We'll get to this in a sec. Stasis Field was nerfed by 1 block, or 2 block if it's upgraded. I think definitely a needed number nerf. It was too strong before. I think 12 block every other turn is very reasonable, and so is 16 when upgraded, compared to 14 and 20. Is that it? Just Spheric Shield left? I guess I could say that now that Incinerate accelerates twice when upgraded, this is kind of worse, but I guess you also don't need an upgrade to accelerate 3 times, which is fine in some circumstances. I'm hoping to see speed boost and time shifter get changes eventually. Anyway, Spheric Shield. Gain 20 block, enter defensive mode. Exhaust. I'm pretty sure this is just a straight up buff, which confuses me, but I'm also not going to complain about it. This is, I think the card, the rare card in the series with the lowest rate of showing up. So, yeah, I think I deserve a little bit of a buff. Like, it's only shown up 8 times in the series so far. 8 times. Other cards have shown up like more than 12. Other rare cards have shown up more than 12 times. This dude just hasn't. So, gain 20 block, enter defensive mode. If I'm not mistaken, this should give you an extra 10 block from entering defensive mode anyway. And the thing about enter defensive mode is that it doesn't mess with your brace counter. Same deal as Guardian Gear, and that's why that's so strong. You get defensive mode basically for free. So this should be giving you 30 block, and the upgrade is 35. Why is the upgrade only 30? Why is the upgrade only 5? That's weird. I guess that's a relic from the previous iteration where it was 15-20, and the brace went up higher. But like, if you compare this to, I guess the fact that you have blur attached to it, where you can keep the block in between turns, I guess having an only 5 block upgrade is justified. But yeah, this I really like this change. It might not have needed it. It might have been. I guess it needed the idea that you didn't have to use brace, because now it consistently enters defensive, and it doesn't make it harder for you to enter defensive later. It's purely a big defensive chunk immediately, which is nice. So yeah, when this card shows up, I'm not going to have to think about the brace numbers as much, which is really nice. So I can choose to either use it or save it. And yeah, that's all the changes here. I'm going to go to the colorless cards real quick, both so you can see the new art for Guardian, and also because we have one more change to talk about, which I arguably should have talked about first, but I decided to go with the Guardian cards first. Let's see, where do we go here? A lot of these are automatons things. You can see some art here. Alright, this is the one. Gear up. Retain Brace 10 Exhaust. This comes from the starter relic rework. Bronze gear no longer gives you 10 block the first time you enter defensive mode, for a total of 20. 10 block on top of the 10 you're already supposed to get. It now gives you a gem, like normal, and gives you this card at the start of combat. 1 cost. Retain Brace 10 Exhaust. You can use it anytime to gain 10 Brace, as long as you're willing to spend the 1 energy, and then you're good. This is what I was mentioning earlier, and why I probably should have done this first, is because it's such a drastic change that it affects all of Guardian gameplay. Brace 10 is big because alongside the curl up, it puts you into defensive on your first shuffle, no matter what card you've taken, even if you have none so far. This means that I don't have to rely so much on roll attack or other big brace numbers in order to enter defensive mode, which is super important for Guardian survival, both in the early game and in early Act 2. Just having the brace to enter defensive mode consistently on the first shuffle. In fact, this is such a big deal that I think I probably won't boss swap anymore unless, except in very big circumstances. Big circumstances? Very specific circumstances, like the act is really poor, so I gamble on a boss relic to get value for later. That kind of thing. But yeah, Brace 10. Putting you in defensive on the first shuffle no matter what. And for later, having the retain so you can use it any time is really, really good. And of course, the reason I said that I'm probably not going to boss swap anymore is because it's an early game thing. And Guardian's early game is the most important part of the game for them, because it's the hardest. Or at least it was. Maybe not so much anymore. Maybe it'll be a lot easier now. Having this as a buff to the early game, I think, means that we keep this relic so that we can use the defensive mode a lot more aggressively. And of course also the Accelerate added to a couple common cards and the Time Bomb makes stasis a lot better. So on top of the already well-known take attacks to kill elites strategy, we now can rely on stasis a lot more. In fact, if you've been around, you might remember the one episode where I took 0 attacks in Act 1. If you haven't seen that episode, you should go and watch it. It's very interesting. At least Act 1 is. Where I took literally 0 attacks in Act 1. And was able to survive through the Act 1 boss with stasis specifically. Using stasis to keep me strong and healthy. So between this change and that, in stasis, I think we'll be way, way stronger in the early game and not have to worry as much about survivability. And I think overall it's going to lead to much stronger games in general. The only thing, of course, is that I miss out on the boss swap, which gives me power throughout the run. So if I decide to keep the starter relic, that means I'm going to be a little bit weaker in the late game. So I need to be careful about that. That being said, I do think that the balance has shifted in the right direction. You don't have to focus as much on the early game anymore, so you don't got to take cards specifically for that just to be able to survive. You now have options to take stuff for early game and to take stuff for late game. And I think that'll lead to a lot more interesting combinations. Overall, great change. And I can't wait to get started with the next episodes to see just how the gameplay loop changes. And I did say that we were going to take a look at the colorless packages. Like, look at these. These are crazy, crazy good. They've all got this little green border around them. Donu and Deca looking great. Bronze Automaton with their Hyper Beam is looking great as well. Defect. It's funny because there's also 2 extra skins with this update. One for Automaton, one for Hexaghost. and this is actually a skin for Automaton called the Perfect. Gameplay's all the same, just have this guy. No cracked core. The outside is like a golden, instead of sort of the faded yellow that Defect has. It's interesting. It's an interesting concept. Orb Walker, also looking great. Spit and Fire. Sentries. With their own beams and repulse, or I don't remember what the attacks are called. Might be Dazing Pulse. The Shapes package, still not the greatest functionally, but looks great. And we got one more Spheric package, the Spiral of Floating Orbs. And then a couple more down here that belong to Automaton as well. And these belong to Hexaghost. If you want to take a look at those ones, just open the game for yourself. I'm focusing on Guardian. But that being said, that's everything I wanted to talk about. Although I just want to reiterate that now that the Guardian starter relic has been changed, as well as a couple of commons, Guardian gameplay is going to change significantly. Not in a complete overhaul, but just an overall confidence in how we tackle Act 1, as well as being able to take more risks. Maybe. We'll have to see. Yeah, that's it. So I'm just going to end on this card. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you in future episodes, especially the 3 guides that I'm working on. Gem Guide will be coming on Saturday, as long as everything's still up to schedule. So stick around for that. I hope you enjoy that as well. But until then, I'll see you later.